Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to turn that information overload into real insight. And today, wow, we're diving into something really challenging. Leadership transition, especially when the odds seem, well, impossible. We're using the ancient story of Joshua, the guy who had to step into Moses' enormous shoes and lead a whole nation into this heavily fortified land.
Yeah, the odds were just historically off the charts. It wasn't just a military thing. Think of it more like a massive organizational change, but mandated from above. What's really key here, I think, is the psychology behind it. It kind of reminds me of that Benjamin Zander analogy we found.
Oh, the conductor?
Right. He'd give his music students an A on day one. The idea wasn't, here's an expectation you have to struggle to meet.
Ah.
It was more like, here's a possibility you get to live into.
I really like that framing. So the promised land wasn't some grade Joshua had to sweat blood to earn.
Exactly.
It was more like a destiny that was already locked in, provided he followed the specific formula.
Precisely. And that changes everything, doesn't it? The mission shifts from just striving and hoping to actually obeying the path that unlocks what's already guaranteed.
Okay.
And well, that meant Joshua had to adopt this very specific strategy, one rooted in divine guidance, not just, clever military tactics.
So that's our mission today. We want to pull out that unique strategy. What were the, let's say, 3 core ingredients God gave Joshua for success? And maybe in doing that, we can sort of redefine what being prosperous really means, especially when you're facing those impossible walls. Let's dig into the transition itself first. Okay, so Joshua, looking at his background, the sources make it clear he wasn't just picked out of a hat.
Not at all. He was basically Moses' chief of staff, his prime minister. For almost 40 years out there in the wilderness, he saw everything.
The highs, the lows, the miracles, the mistakes.
Right. He was battle-tested, and crucially, his faith had been tested too. Remember the spies?
Oh, yeah. Decades earlier. He was one of the only 2, wasn't he?
Exactly. Out of 12, only he and Caleb came back saying, yes, the land is rich, and yes, with God's help, we can take it. He had the history, the loyalty, the spiritual insight.
So the mandate from God must have felt pretty direct then.
Incredibly direct and reassuring. The guarantee was huge.
That God would be with him just as he was with Moses. That's the gold standard, isn't it?
It's the ultimate assurance, really. It basically promised that Canaan would be in, quote, easy conquest if, and it's a big if.
Joshua stuck to the script.
Yeah.
All the commandments.
Exactly. Total fidelity.
Yeah.
And you can see how that would be designed to, calm his nerves.
Yeah.
Because taking over from Moses, that's immense pressure.
No kidding. So God gives the command, prepare to move, prepare for battle in 3 days. What happens next? The people's reaction is interesting.
It really is. They pledge complete obedience. Whatever you command, we'll do. But then there's this little condition they add.
The caveat. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses.
Right. They're basically saying, look, we're with you, Joshua, but we need to see it. We need proof you've got that same divine backing.
They needed that external validation, understandable given Moses' legacy.
Totally understandable. And God delivers it almost immediately. The crossing of the Jordan River.
The miracle. With the priests carrying the ark, the symbol of God's presence, right into the flooding river.
Yes. And the waters part. The sources kind of frame it like divine theater, a very public handover of authority.
What message did that send? To the Israelites, obviously, but also maybe to the Canaanites watching from the other side.
For Israel, it was undeniable, proof positive. God is fully behind Joshua. It instantly magnified him, as the text says, in front of everyone.
Okay.
For the Canaanites, sheer terror. It wasn't just a river drying up. It was a sign that the God who crushed Egypt was now actively on their doorstep.
So the public miracle validates Joshua. But like you said, miracles aren't a daily occurrence. What was the everyday strategy when the ark wasn't, parting waters?
Right, that Jordan crossing.
Yeah.
That bought Joshua immense credibility. But it wasn't the sustainable long-term plan for conquering Canaan over years.
Okay.
So we need to shift focus a bit. Away from the big external signs and more towards the internal guidance system he was given.
Okay, but wait. He's a military commander facing walled cities, experienced armies. And the core strategy is meditate day and night. Doesn't that sound, a little passive, like maybe neglecting the practical side?
That's a fair question. It wasn't about neglecting logistics or intelligence. Joshua certainly had to manage an army.
Right.
It was about priority. God was his primary guide. The sources are pretty emphatic. The first sword that Joshua used was the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God. That's the core instruction right there in Joshua 1.8.
This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night. That was his daily assignment, basically.
His daily requirement, actively internalizing, thinking through, living out the law, the instructions Moses had so carefully written down.
And this commitment, it demanded, what was the phrase, strictest integrity.
Yes, the command was very specific. Don't turn to the right hand or to the left. Stay exactly on the path laid out.
So no shortcuts, no bending the rules based on the situation.
Pretty much. The idea is that the highest form of critical thinking for this leader wasn't clever maneuvering, but strict adherence to the divine wisdom. Trying to rely on human strategy or political convenience or what seems practical in the moment.
Is considered unsafe compared to just following the instructions.
Exactly. Fidelity to the law keeps you on the best path, even if it looks counterintuitive sometimes.
Okay, so the law is the guide. But you mentioned something else. The sources claim that this meditation actually increases personal power. How does that work? How does thinking about the law translate into, power to win battles?
It's described almost like a spiritual feedback loop or a flywheel, maybe.
Yeah.
The idea is when you yield yourself to be an instrument for God's work, your own abilities actually grow through being used in alignment with His will. The more you use the knowledge from the law, the more you exercise judgment based on it, the more capacity, more power, more insight you actually gain. It's like drawing from an ever-flowing spring with the connection to the guidebook being the source.
All right, let's look at the overall plan, the structure of the whole campaign. The book of Joshua itself, it seems structured, not random.
Very structured. It follows a clear, four-part divine initiative. Cross the Jordan, take the land, divide the land, and then serve God through obedience.
Cross, take, divide, serve. Okay.
And that structure reinforces the idea that God's plans, while guaranteed in a sense, still need that faithful human response. Which brings us back to that Xander idea and also this linguistic thing, the prophetic perfect.
Okay, the grammar part can get a bit technical. Let's skip the deep linguistics lesson. What's the core implication for Joshua and for us?
The core implication is profound. God talks about giving Joshua the land using two verb forms. One implies it's happening now, it's a process. But the other, the prophetic perfect, speaks of it as already done, in the past tense.
Even though Joshua hadn't conquered it yet.
Exactly. The promise is so ironclad that God states it as a finished reality. The land had already been given.
Wow. Okay, that totally reframes the mission again, doesn't it? If the result is guaranteed, then the focus isn't so much on achieving the win,
but on performing the process correctly, faithfully following the steps laid out.
Which leads us right into how the Bible seems to define success and prosperity differently.
Precisely. We have to pull apart two Hebrew words here. Salak and sakal. They often get translated as prosper or succeed, but they're distinct.
Okay.
Salak is closer to, say, successfully completing the mission. Did you accomplish the task you were given? It's about the outcome of the plan.
Right. Did you cross the river, take the city?
Yes. But sakal is more about the how. It means acting wisely, prudently, specifically by fearing God and obeying His word. It's about the process and the attitude.
So real biblical success, sakal, isn't necessarily about wealth or power or even just winning.
Not primarily. It's about wise action, defined by faithfulness to God's instructions. Salak, the successful outcome, is expected to follow from sakal, the wise obedience.
Okay, so how does that apply today? In our world, success is almost always measured by, profit, results, ROI.
Well, the sources fundamentally shift that goalpost. True success, from this perspective, is about aligning with spiritual values, being faithful to the divine plan or instructions you've been given. The key metric isn't the size of your bank account, but the degree of your integrity and obedience, especially when things get tough.
It's like living into that guaranteed A we talked about earlier. Wise action is just fulfilling that potential through obedience.
Exactly.
Now, for some people listening, this heavy focus on law and obedience might sound like it clashes with, grace or salvation by faith. How do the sources handle that?
Yeah, that's a common misunderstanding, almost a false dichotomy. Our sources really bring them together. Think of it like this. Faith is maybe like the key that starts the car and gives you the license to drive it, grants, pardon, access, relationship. But the law, that's the roadmap, the rules of the road. It tells you how to navigate safely, how to stay on course, the moral structure. You need both to reach the destination.
So trust in God's promises, faith, and obedience to His instructions, the law, they aren't opposites.
Not at all. They're inseparable. Two sides of the same coin. They actually establish each other. Trust leads to a desire to obey, and obedience strengthens trust.
Okay, so Joshua has the divine guarantee, he has the instruction manual, the law. But let's be real, the situation on the ground was still terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying.
Remember the description, Canaanite cities, unassailable, their populations, trained for war, Israel, mostly former slaves, lacking, siege engines and advanced weaponry.
And even the regional superpowers like Egypt had struggled to get a permanent foothold in that area. It was tough territory.
I just try to imagine Joshua standing there looking at the walls of Jericho. The dread must have been immense.
No doubt. Strategically, militarily, it looked impassable, which is precisely why God had to keep repeating that command. Be strong and very courageous, not just once, but multiple times.
And it wasn't just about psyching himself up for battle.
Well, yes, battle morale was part of it, surely. But the sources suggest the deeper reason was something else.
Okay.
The primary need for courage and strength was to remain faithful to the Torah, to the law, with all its specific, often countercultural demands.
So the real fight wasn't just against the Canaanites.
Often the bigger battle is internal. It's resisting the pressure to compromise, to take the easy way out, to listen to human reasoning that tells you to turn to the right hand or to the left of God's explicit instructions.
It takes more courage to stick to an unpopular principle than to charge into a fight sometimes.
That's exactly the implication. The strength to hold fast to the divine path when everything screams for a shortcut or a compromise.
And the guarantee, the ultimate success factor, was tied directly to God's presence. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee.
Yes, that promise is the antidote to the doubt and anxiety. It's the bedrock. And of course, it's a promise Christians hold on to today as well.
This whole idea, courage and obedience making obstacles crumble, it reminds me of that story about Sudakar in Thailand.
Oh yes, that's a powerful modern illustration of the same principle. It shows that the unassailable wall isn't always made of stone. Sometimes it's cultural resistance or spiritual opposition.
So what happened there? He was working on a campus.
Right, a global mission pioneer.
Right.
And in this town, there was this huge ancient tree, considered sacred, a spirit tree, covered in ribbons and offerings. It was central to the local traditional beliefs.
Okay, so a major cultural and spiritual roadblock for his work.
Huge. And he didn't just go in swinging an axe. He started by building relationships, cooking classes, English lessons, practical service. But all along, he was praying intensely, studying the Word, seeking guidance, following the Joshua model, really.
Meditating day and night.
You could say that. Then, guided by that, he took courageous action. He started gently removing the offerings from the tree. This was stepping directly against a deeply ingrained tradition.
That took guts.
It did. And according to the story, a spiritual voice even spoke to him, offering him wealth if he'd just leave the tree alone. But Sudakar, drawing strength from his faith, commanded the spirit to leave in Jesus' name. That was the Sakal moment, the wise, courageous obedience, refusing to compromise.
Wow.
And the result, 3 days later, the massive tree started to die. Within about a month, it was dead enough that he could chop it down. That single act of courageous fidelity, refusing to turn aside, caused this huge symbolic obstacle to literally fall.
And it had a direct impact.
Absolutely. It broke through the spiritual resistance in a visible way and apparently led directly to 7 people choosing baptism. The power flowed from the obedience, just like with Joshua.
So Joshua successfully leads the conquest of Canaan. Job done, right? But the sources suggest there's a bigger picture we need to grasp.
Yeah, the story doesn't actually end with just Canaan. Knowing the ultimate long-term goal actually reframes Joshua's immediate mission.
How so?
Well, his conquest wasn't just an isolated land grab for Israel. It was understood as one crucial step towards fulfilling a much, much larger promise, the one made way back to Abraham.
The promise that Abraham would be the heir of the world.
Exactly. The ultimate inheritance wasn't just that strip of land along the Mediterranean. It was global.
Wow. So the vision extended way beyond Canaan.
Way beyond. The ultimate fulfillment envisioned is the entire earth, restored, freed from sin and its curse, an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, as later writers put it. And Abraham himself seemed to get this. The sources say he wasn't ultimately looking for Canaan as the final destination, but for a heavenly city, one whose builder and maker is God. He saw Canaan as important but temporary.
Yeah.
His real hope was in that future, immortal inheritance.
Okay, so what's the takeaway for us today? If we see ourselves as children of Abraham, spiritually speaking,
The application is pretty direct. It means that, like Abraham and like Joshua in his own way, we're called to live here as pilgrims and strangers. Our focus shouldn't be solely on earthly possessions or comfort, but on faithfulness now, aiming for that better country later.
So, conquering Canaan for Joshua was a vital, necessary act of obedience on the way to that ultimate eternal success.
Precisely. The faithful action right now is always connected to that bigger, eternal inheritance. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, diving deep into Joshua's story. Let's try to boil down that recipe for success, those core ingredients we found. First, it seems to be about understanding guaranteed potential. Success isn't about clawing your way to earn something. It's about living into a destiny that's already promised, like that prophetic perfect.
Right. And second, it's about wise action, that idea of sakal. Prosperity isn't just about results or wealth. It's defined by faithfully accomplishing the task you were given, acting prudently, wisely, by obeying the instructions, meditating on them day and night.
And third, that crucial element, courage rooted in fidelity. The strength needed isn't just for the physical battle, but maybe even more so, the moral courage to stick to the path, to obey, even when culture or fear or human logic tells you to compromise, to turn aside.
hmm And when you put those together, you really see how obedience and faith aren't separate things. They fuel each other. You can't really have one without the other, which leads to maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. The scriptures tell us to, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If the outcome, the inheritance, is guaranteed like we discussed, why the fear and trembling?
Good question.
Well, perhaps it's because our participation, our election even, is demonstrated and confirmed through our obedience. We align ourselves with that guaranteed success when we choose to follow every word that comes from God. The trembling comes from the high stakes of that choice.
So why should you, listening right now, care about this ancient story of transition and conquest? Because we all face walls, right? Difficulties that seem insurmountable, things that fill us with dread. And in those moments, the message from these sources is incredibly direct. God says, go forward.
hmm
The promise is that those huge obstacles, those formidable walls, they tend to diminish, even vanish, as you simply step forward, following the path of obedience, humbly trusting in Him. So the question for you today is, what unassailable wall is standing in your life right now, maybe in your career, maybe a cultural pressure, maybe a personal spiritual battle that requires you to simply be strong and very courageous and go